Well, today we're going to talk to you about the origins of this radio program. Go ahead. You know you're in a small town when technically it's a rural township. It's okay to respond. And at the center there's just one general store, not 3 or 4 stores lined up in a small strip. In radio, we never hear the applause. Some might call it the center of nowhere, but we produced our first show at Norway Center with a cottonwood radio tower and an audience of nightshade and sunflower. Our faces are made for pirate radio, but not our voices. They're made for YouTube. Our humor is best at dress rehearsal. At prime time, our wheels will often come unglued. We talk like no one's listening, but when we dance, we imagine there's people watching. Thanks, Scott. That's Scott. So come on through the garden gate. It's time to get this rock garden rockin'. We got guitars and we got guests. We got kazoo and piano. I forgot my kazoo. We don't have Woe Be Gone, but we got jokes on Jesse Spano. Is there a kazoo store downtown, Brookings? Try not to judge our garden by the number of weeds growing, because while most folks are out hoeing, we're in here TEDxing. Our mics are made special by a guy from Bushnell, South Dakota. But our mojo comes from sweet corn, sour luck, and club soda. We got free range rock and roll. We got jokes about hot dishes. We don't got Myron Florent, but we got songs about paddle fishes. If we can keep our avant-garde alive through one more winter, we're not gonna save the world, but we might salvage Pumpkin Center. Thank you. Check one, check. Okay, it's still on. I'm sitting on my mic pack. Scrawny, optimistic, Irish. I am the Flower Man, otherwise known as Ted Heeren, writer and producer of a volunteer late-night public radio show program. I'm also the co-owner of Fresh Produce, the creative firm that produces those Perkins storage and transfer radio ads. Anybody familiar with those? Yeah. They haven't changed in 10 years. Up here with me is godfather of the Rowena Polo Club. This is my father-in-law, 3-time South Dakota Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. He's also in the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just recently, right? Jim Groth. So I'll tell you a little bit about my origins, I guess. I grew up on a farm near a place called Norway Center, a suburb of Beresford, South Dakota. And it was a classic small family farm. We had a little bit of everything. We raised hogs, we had cattle, we had chickens, we had crops. And my dad was a football coach and obviously a farmer. And my mom was a nurse, and she was a hardcore gardener. And that's kind of where you can kind of see where some of my influences have come from. But what most people don't realize is that I have 4 older sisters, and a lot of people make jokes about big families. You have enough people to start a band, but we literally had a band. The girls formed the Heeren sisters. There was 4 of them, so it worked out. And because they couldn't leave me home alone, they started bringing me to their shows. Like we would go to the Hudson Pork Producers Convention, or we'd play the state fair, or more likely we'd play the Union County Fair, is actually typical venue. But I would have to introduce the act. And I remember my first gig was the Beresford Centennial in 1984. And so that's kind of where it all started. So like I said, you can kind of see how my home at Norway Center has influenced me, but I wouldn't say that was the origin of this radio program. Like the MCs announced, I did study broadcast journalism and horticulture here in Brookings at the land-grant university, and which really just means I was kind of a confused kid. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I just kind of paid attention to what I liked. But it wasn't until the Brookings, it was my junior year at the Brookings Arts Festival. I was hanging out across the street. That's the exciting spot to hang out at the Brookings Arts Festival because that's where all the shady vendors hang out. I mean, you're not quite sure if they're there for the arts festival, if they're just kind of set up and selling things until the cops kick them out. So I was there and I was walking around and I see this guy selling bonsai trees out of a VW bus. And he's got stacks of vintage books about gardening. He's got these old gardening tools, and it was like I was in the never-ending story. You know, when the kid at the bookstore gets the book and it's practically glowing. I see this volume, this reference book, at the bottom of this stack of books, kind of by the spare tire where this guy is set up. And I read on the binding, and it says, "Ye Old Guide to Hosting a Rock and Roll Garden Show." And he was charging a lot, and I was a college student, but I picked that up, and I learned it. I mean, it had like 900 pages in there, and I have basically memorized that book. So I mean, you can see how that moment may have inspired this radio show, at the Brookings Arts Festival across the street. But I wouldn't say that was actually the origin of our program. Like they mentioned, I really did start the show across the street. I mean, the first time we turned on a microphone and actually said, "You're listening to the Rock Garden Tour," was over there. It was in the summer of 2000. I interned at that radio station in the old train depot. And it was where I convinced the program director at the time, who is actually now my business partner at Fresh Produce. I convinced him to let me try this show out. And I just started, I gave him a mixtape, and then he didn't listen to that. And then I gave him like a spreadsheet that had all the high points of my idea, and he didn't look at that. But I just kept, I kept coming at him, and eventually he just got so sick of me that he gave me the coveted, the Wednesday night spot, the late night Wednesday night spot. We had a start time at 10 p.m., and we went on until 12 p.m. or until we accidentally shut off the radio station, which happened twice. So it is where we produced our first show. But I wouldn't say that Depot Radio is the origin of our radio program. I mean, you can look at origins in significant places and things, but I don't think that's where they really are. Just a couple of weeks ago, I read a memoir by a writer, a writer and a grass farmer, a shepherd named Richard Gilbert, and it's a recollection of his years in the Appalachians on a small sheep ranch. And he writes about his relationships mostly, his relationships to his family, the locals around there who thought he was a little bit peculiar, and his relationship to the land, probably most importantly, but also the relationship to his flock of sheep. And he writes a lot about his hired hand, this guy named Sam. And Sam really annoyed him at first. He had a lot of colloquialisms that this Richard Gilbert guy who didn't grow up around there didn't understand, and he didn't get into them. So it took him a while to warm up to Sam, but this is a memoir that kind of covers like a decade of this guy's adventures on a sheep ranch. So eventually he was quite fond of Sam, and at the end of the book, I mean, I hope there's nobody who's reading. Is there anybody reading that book right now? That memoir about sheep herding? You're going to have to plug your ears. There should be earplugs beneath your seat, so I'll wait for you. Just put them in there. Sam had a run of tough luck, and he lost a battle to cancer. And as Richard Gilbert reflects in the final chapter, he was reflecting on the loss of his friend. He wrote, and I just loved this quote. He said, "I understood that part of the genius of the place passed out of memory with men like Sam." As I was preparing for this Origins talk, I mean, that was exactly what I needed to read, because it helps me articulate a thought that Origins aren't found in a depot radio station or on the shady side of the Brookings Arts Festival. Origins are actually alive in people. Origins are cared for and shared in the work we do, in the music we play, in the stories we tell, in the art we make, the ideas we dream up, the late-night public radio shows we produce, and the songs we sing. I'm going to give you a little preview of tonight's show. I mean, this is sort of, that bit about the earplugs, that was actually off the cuff. We didn't script that. So that's kind of, the general spirit of the radio show. But I'm going to give you just a little taste of one of the songs that we're going to sing. We do a lot of original tunes. Most of them are inspired by real life, according to us, which is actually not very real. But one of my favorite stories happened in the Rabbit Barn at the Lincoln County Fair. Now, our show tonight is inspired by we're calling it the Fancy Country Barn Tour. But one of my favorite stories happened in the Rabbit Barn at the Lincoln County Fair. My sister April, she was a card-carrying member of the Happy Homemakers 4-H Club in Lincoln County. Not really knowing what she was doing, she entered her adorable pet bunny, a beautiful little baby bunny. She entered it in the meat production category at the Lincoln County Fair. So she thought they were going to judge the bunny on its cuteness, but it turns out they were looking for the meaty girth, I guess is kind of, so it didn't score well. But April's experience, it inspired an entire show that we did about rabbits, because our Forestburg correspondent pointed out one day, and just, it was an amazing observation, that he's never heard a rabbit story with a happy ending. And think about it. I mean, that's very, very true. You've never heard a rabbit story with a happy ending. And so in South Dakota, the Midwest, I mean, I hope this isn't just a generalization, but I think it's true. I mean, we hear a lot of bad news, especially growing up on a small farm. You get used to unfortunate things that happen, and at some point, you laugh at it. I mean, at some point, that's the only thing you can do is laugh. At least that's how I deal with a lot of things in my life. So we wrote kind of a sweet little song about a bunch of unfortunate rabbit stories. I'm going to play that for you right now. You're going to have to use your imagination. We don't have a PowerPoint. My sister April and her mini lop ear were hoping for purples at the county fair. But upon her arrival, she turned white as a sheet when her sweet little bunny was being judged for its meat. Fiddly, faddly, paddly fish. Wild Bill Hickok, Oil Can's pet wiener dog, was playing poker in the garden with Jack Rabbit McCall. Bill played a winning hand, and Jack Rabbit seen red, so he bit on Bill's back until he was dead. Fiddly, faddly, paddly fish, diddly, daddly, so delish. This girl named Maria on our Facebook page said her brothers raised a bunny in an old wire cage. They sang him a song once, bum bum bumbledy bum, and then he died one morning of a crushed septum. Fiddly, fat, that's a true story. Paddly fish, diddly daddly, squiddly. I mean, how can it not be? Hippity happity, so delish. For about 3 whole days, my sweet Liz had a pet. That's his daughter. Errol Flynn was as cute as rabbits can get. And then when he passed, it was Thumper she chose to be her pet bunny, till that day when he froze. Fiddly, faddly, paddly fish, diddly, daddly, squiddly, squaddly, hippity, happity, so delish. Hugh Glass was out walking near the petrified trees when he startled a bear and some rabid bunnies. The legends, they say that he wrestled that bear, but the truth of it is he was mauled by them hares. Fiddly, faddly, paddly fish, diddly, daddly, squiddly, squaddly, hippity, happity, so delish. Thank you. So you've probably noticed that I do have my portable teleprompter here. That's kind of how it works in public radio. You're writing your script and you're changing the lyrics of your songs right up until the thing. So I've given up on memorizing anything. That's something that I have lost throughout doing this public radio show. But I will say that if you do have kind of a tragic rabbit story that has been haunting you for years and years, and you'd like to hear me make a joke out of it, go ahead and share it with me. I'll be wandering around with my band, and we'll put it right in the song. I'm going to wrap it up. Here's kind of the summary. When we stay true to ourselves, when we think of our own original ideas, when we react to things in an honest and authentic way, we're ensuring that the genius of this place will not pass out of memory. I like to talk about gardening for 1,000 reasons, and I would be happy to sit down and talk about the importance of knowing where your food comes from, and the importance of taking care of the soil, and the importance of knowing how to grow things. I love to put together eclectic playlists of rock and roll music from artists from all over the place. But more than all of that, Rock Garden Tour has become a place where we cultivate, nurture, and grow our origins.